TNA, oh my god, a company ran by absolute head cases. Oh boy, geez Louise. Not only did they do one of the most insane things conceivable on Thursday night, they ran a pay-per-view the next day and ended that show the same way. TNA is run by dullards, okay? It is amazing. But I'm going to say this. We're going to talk about TNA Turning Point 2025 from November the 14th. We're also going to be discussing the live episode of Impact the day before on November the 13th. We're just going to tie those two things together. And I want to discuss, obviously we're going to start with Frankie Kazerian winning the World Championship from Mike Santana. There was a whole lot of hubbub about this online. I'm not going to go into too much detail about how it happened. It was a Money in the Bank kind of situation where Santana had been attacked by these NXT guys. We'll talk about that shortly. And he had injured his arm, and then Kazarian just took advantage. Okay. So the idea that Frankie Kazarian would win the world title, I never liked Frankie Kazarian. I was never a fan. I certainly have not been a fan since he's been older. But they have been teasing Frankie Kazarian being the world champion since 2024. All right. I think he won the Call Your Shot Gauntlet in 2024. And they were teasing him being the world champion then, but they were in the middle of this thing with Joe Hendry, where Joe Hendry had gotten super over, and they were trying to make sense of that. And then underneath that was Mike Santana getting really over. And then the NXT things happened, and they put the belt on Trick Williams, and there was a lot of stuff going on there. So it seemed like Kaz was supposed to be champion at some point in early 2025 or something like that. And they basically put it on pause. He floated around for a bit. I think he won that international title. And then he lost it pretty quickly, and they just put him back in this situation from Bound for Glory. So it didn't come completely out of nowhere that Frankie Kazarian was going to be the world champion. So I'm not really all that surprised that they did that. Now, the fact that Mike Santana only had the belt for 30 days, 0 title defenses. He was supposed to wrestle Ryan Nemeth, and that was supposed to be his first title defense. And it was because Ryan Nemeth had gotten his face during a promo segment. And actually, the NXT guys attacked him before he could actually finish off Ryan Nemeth. So a lot of people feel bad for Mike Santana. They're saying, hey, this whole thing has been a disaster. He didn't win the title in New York when he should have. They pushed it back to Bound for Glory. Then they went on hiatus for 4 weeks while he was the champion, and he didn't get the chance to defend the title. He got no celebration, even though it was like a 4-week celebration, and he got screwed as the champion. Well, I say, that's what wrestling is, right? The last time something happened like this, and it was very, very similar, I remember it. I believe it was like 2011 or 2012 when Christian came back to WWE, and he defeated Alberto Del Rio to win the World Heavyweight Championship. I believe it was a ladder match, if I remember correctly. I'm going off memory. Then they booked him to wrestle Randy Orton in his first title defense, and he lost. And he lost clean. All right? I remember the internet absolutely exploding. It was so bad. It was a meltdown of epic proportions. And people were talking about how bad the rating was going to do on SmackDown. Because this was back when SmackDown was taped. And they were talking about how bad the rating was going to be. And WWE doesn't give a fuck about the fans. They don't care about Christian. He needs to go back to TNA. All this stuff. It was just awful. It was a cesspool. I loved it. It ended up being, I think the rating ended up being slightly higher than average. Because everybody knew there was going to be a title switch. So everybody watched it. And they wanted to see what was going to happen. So Randy Orton won the title, beat Christian for it. Then what happened is they spent the entire summer building up Christian and Randy Orton, leading to Christian turning heel. He won the title back. He won the title on some bullshit when he spit on Randy Orton and Randy got disqualified and Christian won the belt back, leading to this entire feud with him and Randy. He got a big push that summer. And most people just forgot about it over time. You know, you got that initial guttural hatred of the company. Why would you do this to us? Why would you do this to me? And then it's over. Once you need to ride the wave of people being angry. In wrestling, there is very little you could do where the wave will crash into you and you will drown. You have to make a lot of mistakes. Like WCW made the kind of mistakes where you ended up underwater, right? You know, not just, hey, they beat Goldberg. Well, they had to beat Goldberg eventually. But it was beating Goldberg, then the finger poke of doom, and then, months and months and months of Vince Russo and Jeff Jarrett and all this sort of stuff. And that, the water kept rising and they couldn't paddle. They didn't have a well enough formulated idea to get out from underneath all of the stuff that they had dumped onto themselves. TNA, I'm not going to say is in the same boat. I will say that they're playing with a very dangerous game with this Mike Santana thing. Because you started out with this guy where everybody was saying he needed to just grab the tag rope. And he's not going to make it as a main event guy. It's over. He shouldn't even be a singles act. This is all the AEW fans. The same people who are mad, who are saying LOL TNA, are the same people who didn't believe in Mike Santana in the first place. So that's the first thing that makes me not react the same way everybody else reacts. Because I'm like, the people who didn't believe in him anyway, and they don't watch the show anyway, they don't like what they did. Okay, fine. So Santana losing the title in this way is the best way for him to lose the title. Because your only other option is for him to go in there with somebody who's better than him and to beat him. That's not what you want. What you want is this guy to get screwed. Now, they did this before. They did this similar thing, I believe, with Josh Alexander. Where Josh Alexander, was in the long chase for the title. He finally won it. And then they had Moose do the call your shot gauntlet thing, beat Josh Alexander for the title, and then Josh Alexander chased Moose for it. They did almost the exact same goddamn thing. So a lot of people are jumping on delirious all about this and stuff like that, but they've done this before. All right? And if I remember correctly, Josh Alexander's wife and his child were in the ring when that whole cash-in thing happened. It was pretty nasty. The difference being, nobody gave a shit about Josh Alexander. Not for real. Meanwhile, Mike Santana has been a consistent draw for TNA. He has been the main event of both of the highest TNA drawing pay-per-views, or in terms of attendance, in history. The UBS show, which I believe was Slammiversary, and then the most recent Bound for Glory. He was in the main event of both of those shows. So there's a difference there. That's why I say they're playing a dangerous game, because Mike Santana is proving to be somebody that the people are actually interested in, and not just in his hometown. Like I'm seeing other people talk about, oh yeah, this guy was a big draw for TNA. Yeah, in his hometown. Santana seemingly is drawing everywhere that they go. Don't fuck this up. All right. But this is the best way to get the belt off of him, because you don't want him to go in there and get beat clean. And if you build up somebody to beat him, they're going to have to cheat in order to beat him. So why not use the Money in the Bank concept? That's the best way to get the belt off of him, because he's good in a chase position. And this is something that wrestling fans, and a lot of this is WWE, because in wrestling, throughout history, the babyface chases. And the babyface gets the title. They're not the champion very long. They drop the title. You can go and look at, guys like Dusty and, other baby faces of that era. They weren't world champion very long. Bruno was, a standard bearer because that's the WWF. The WWF is the pioneer when it comes to babyface territory. The champion fights a revolving door of heels. That's the WWF booking style. All other promotions, the champion was usually either neutral or they were a heel, and they fought off a revolving door of baby faces. This, for Santana, they probably didn't have any ideas of how to book this guy as a babyface dominant champion going forward. He's an underdog character. He finally achieved his dream and then had it snatched away from him. So now the idea is to get the people behind him even more. Because he got there, so he proved he could do it. They didn't rug pull him again. But this other unfortunate thing happened. This is how you build heroes and stories. And a lot of people don't like this either. But the hero climbs a mountain. He looks like he's achieved something. And then something terrible happens and he falls down again. He's got to go away back up again. It's the Super Mario. He saves the princess only for the princess to get kidnapped again. He goes and saves the princess and just for the princess to get kidnapped again. That's how stories work. So I'm not surprised at all that they did this. I was shocked that they gave that they dared do it, but it took balls to do it. And I'll say this: TNA being the only wrestling company willing to take risks in 2025. Everybody else is playing it safe. Everybody else is playing it super safe. TNA isn't. They're going out there saying, "Look, we ain't got nothing to lose. We got some of the smallest venues. We don't have a really solid TV deal. Everything's up in the air. We're willing to try stuff." WWE is not willing to try anything. AEW is not willing to try anything. TNA is going to try shit. I support that because wrestling and being creative in general is about taking risks. It's about, hey, this might be dumb, but let's see what happens. And it's pro wrestling, so if it's fucked up, then in 6 months nobody's gonna really remember it anyway. It's not like if you write, Attack on Titan and then you botch the finish and everybody's looking at you like you ruined your own story. You can't go back and fix it. This is pro wrestling. If you botch a title run, you could just go back. We'll give them the belt later and fix this. Because that's what they do in wrestling. They make stupid mistakes. Ronnie Garvin defeats Ric Flair to win the world title. Why would you do that? Well, we were just trying to shake things up for a house show or something like that. Okay, well, I guess it ended up being a mistake, but whatever. They fixed it later. They put the belt back on Flair and everybody was happy again. That's the same thing that's going to happen here. If they can't pull themselves out of this situation because Kazerian is such an anti-draw and he ruins business, and Santana, they're botching how they're going to tell this story, what they're going to eventually do is put the belt back on Santana. And that's going to be it. And most people are going to be like, oh, hey, remember that dumb thing they did where they took the belt off Santana a month after him having it? And then they're going to go back to LOL TNA, look at the mid-card. And that's really what it is. I mean, people who are overthinking this whole thing is doing too much. This is typical pro wrestling storytelling. It's just featuring TNA, which is a smaller company, and they're willing to take the risk of playing around with their top guy like this because other companies aren't. Other companies want their top guys to be bulletproof, but the easiest people to work are the smart fans, and the smart fans think the babyface should win all the time, or the babyface should be John Cena. And then if the babyface is John Cena and he wins all the time, then they complain. So here's what happened. That's the last thing I'm going to say, then I'm going to get into the actual show. TNA had no hype. They had nothing going for them for weeks and weeks and weeks and months and months and months and years, actually. They were having Will Ospreay versus Speedball Mike Bailey in a match that I think Meltzer gave like 4 3/4 stars or 5 stars or something like that. Nobody gave a shit. Nobody cared. And then they started doing this thing with TNA, now with NXT, and now people are talking about it. Talking about the brand for the first time in forever. Gates are going up. Interest in the brand's going up. People are talking about it more. Then they made the mistake of going for Bound for Glory. They went on hiatus afterwards. It killed their momentum. But how did they get their momentum back? How did they get people talking about TNA again? They took the belt from Santana. So now people are watching TNA again. They may not be sitting down watching the show, but they're paying attention. They're talking about it more. Smart. It's smart. Because this is the entertainment business. People being happy is not necessarily great for business. Because they get bored with their own happiness. That's the same reason why wealth doesn't make people happy. Because if you're poor and you get rich, it's great. But if you're rich and you stay rich, you get bored. You start looking for different ways of getting a thrill out of life. This is TNA. They're fucking broke. They don't have much going for them. So they figure we can do this. And if we got the creative to pull it off, then let's do it. But I'm not sure they got the creative to pull it off. I'm not looking at this pay-per-view event. This pay-per-view event was lackluster. So part of this gimmick is that Mike Santana is angry. He's frustrated. They've been posting online that Santana was refusing to answer calls for TNA, and he skipped a meet and greet. He was doing all these terrible things. And they were trying to lead people to believe that Santana was furious with the company for the creative decision. And then right before the show started, they figured out it was a work. Santana showed up for the main event of this show. He was tag teaming with Steve Maclin versus Frankie Kazerian and Nick Nemeth. Now, Kazerian and Nemeth had an issue on the pre-show because they're the co-winners of the Call Your Shot Gauntlet. So they're both the Call Your Shot Gauntlet winner. I didn't know that's how it worked, but whatever. In other words, Nick Nemeth was trying to cash in the Call Your Shot Gauntlet when he was attacked backstage. This was right before Frankie Kazerian won the title. And there's a belief that Frankie Kazerian was involved with the NXT assault on Mike Santana. So there's that intrigue there. And Nick Nemeth tells him earlier in the night, we're going to handle our business as a tag team, and then I'm cashing in my Call Your Shot Gauntlet, and I'm going to kick your ass and win the world title. So that's the story going into this thing. And Santana is frustrated. He showed up late to the event. Steve Maclin went out there and fought by himself. Now, you would think he should be pissed. He had to fight these two guys by himself because Santana refused to show up. And then Santana showed up in the middle of the match. He won the fucking match. He beat Kazarian. So that was that. And then the NXT guys attacked again. Now, we're going to talk about the NXT guys in a little bit. I want to finish this story first. So the NXT guys attacked Santana and Steve Maclin again, just as Nick Nemeth was trying to use his Call Your Shot Gauntlet trophy. So as they are attacking them, the commentators are telling you they're attacking everybody except Kazarian. Because the belief is that Kazarian is behind all of this. Now, Ava earlier in the night has said that she's not involved in this at all. Her and Santino are yelling at each other. They promised that they were going to continue working together, TNA and NXT. And then the NXT guys continued to attack and ruin TNA shows. And so now Santino's mad at Ava. Ava doesn't understand what's going on. She's trying to control NXT, but she's not in control of these guys. They're just doing what they want to do. But at least for the purpose of this story right here, Kazarian is looking very suspicious. Well, he was until they jumped him too. So they beat up Frankie Kazarian and kicked his ass. The Santino got attacked too. And so did the Hardy Boys, who came out with chairs. They got jumped too. So they're beating up all of these people. Now, the problem with the NXT jumping people is the guys that they have that are the NXT talents that are featured in this angle. It is the who's who, what's what of the bottom of NXT. All right, it's High Rise, who I couldn't tell you. For starters, they were the tag team guys that were hanging out with Wes Lee, who is back to being Desmond Xavier in the Rascals. We'll talk about that in a second. Lexis King, Stax, Charlie Dempsey, Brooks Jensen, and Robert Stone. Okay. These are the very... Brooks Jensen has spent weeks in Evolve. He's been in Evolve for like 6 months now, okay? If I don't know if Evolve's been around for 6 months, but he's been in Evolve pretty much the whole time. Lexus King, they've been doing nothing with him. And Stacks, of course, since he got separated from the mob stuff, he hasn't been that interesting. But they are playing on the fact that Stacks is dating Ariana Grace, and Ariana Grace is Santino's daughter, and now she's officially the liaison to NXT and TNA. So they're going to play that storyline up. And that was how Santino ended up getting attacked, because he was yelling at Stacks, and Stacks was like, wait, what's going on here? I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you. And then Santino got attacked from behind. But so there's layers to the story that they're playing here, but these guys, just the names that they're using, not big names. Charlie Dempsey is the guy who injured Mike Santana. And Charlie Dempsey is being positioned as kind of the guy who, he puts like Santana like this really crazy arm bar or something like that and injured him. We don't know who's going to be behind this. Robert Stone has been floating around as sort of the authority figure. He was one of Ava's assistants, and then he's one of the authority figures on Evolve. He actually popped up on TNA, I think earlier this year, actually, trying to lead, NXT guys to do damage to TNA. The problem with this thing is that they've ruined 2 TNA main events with this stuff. And these guys are not huge stars. So there's going to be a lot of grumbling about the level of the guys that you're bringing in. Now, TNA needs star power. They need males, right? they need star power. They need guys for Santana to fight. They need guys for the Hardys to fight and all this kind of stuff. They're not using their best, though. They're using... Some of these guys are pretty low rent. I'm going to be the first to say it. I loved NXT. But none of these guys are guys that NXT cares about right now. They could have gone up a little bit and chosen some different guys, but there's not a whole lot of guys in NXT that matter at this point in time. There's probably like 4. I'm talking about males, right? It's like Oba, Ricky Starks, Trick Williams, and Ethan Page. That's it. In terms of top guys in NXT that matter. And none of them are going to jump ship to TNA to do this angle. All right. So that's been the problem, is that the NXT guys are not the top guys, but they're being positioned as the top heels on TNA right now. This reminded me a whole lot of when they did the Honor No More storyline, where there was all of these refugees from the death of Ring of Honor, and they jumped to TNA, and they were running roughshod over the TNA roster for a while. And it was Matt Taven and Jonathan Gresham and I think Jay Lethal and a bunch of mid-card, slightly upper mid-card Ring of Honor guys. And it was fun for a little bit, and then they all got reabsorbed into Tony Khan's Ring of Honor. These guys are eventually going to get reabsorbed back into back into NXT. So that's not that much of a concern. But that they would ruin 2 pay-per-view or 2 main events, a live Impact and their pay-per-view, means that they have something important that they want to do with these guys. And they're saying, hey, the NXT relationship is still very important to us because it's a source of talent. It's also a source of intrigue, getting people to talk. But it's not, there's no Trick Williams here. There's nobody who's going to be the future of, the company they're going to push in this group here. And that's the problem. So now we're going to have to figure out who from this thing is going to be sort of the voice, because none of these guys can really cut promos. And none of these guys have any name or any authority. So somebody's going to be clearly behind them. So either they're going to turn Ava heel and NXT is invading TNA, or there's going to be somebody else. Maybe they're going to pull off a Carlos Silva is Vince McMahon, and he's bringing in a dose of poison into TNA. I don't know, man. But ultimately, this is what they were trying to do. Okay, this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to, keep intrigue into their product when they was gone for a month. So they're trying their best. I don't know what else to tell you, but they're doing what they can. The seventh match on the show, Rich Swann was defeated by Leon Slater. This was a pretty solid match. You know, they're still building up the idea of Leon Slater and Javon Evans as a tag team. So this match was just kind of an empty contest where, you know, Leon Slater got a chance to show off what he could do, and Rich Swann had no chance of winning. The sixth match on the show, The System, which is JDC, Eddie Edwards, Moose, and Brian Myers. They wrestled the Rascals, which was Desmond Alexander, Myron Reed, Zachary Wentz, and Trey Miguel. So all four members of the Rascals are back. This was announced on the Impact show, where JDC, who wrestled in WWE as Fandango, announced his retirement and saying that he's going to be gone at some point in time. But before he retired, the Rascals wanted to have one last hurrah with him and said, yeah, we're going to bring back our guy. And Desmond Alexander is back. He's got his locks again, but these are clearly extensions. All right. Clearly this is weave in his head. It's that mystical shit. It looks like Maxine from Living Single. All right. It's bruh. Okay. Hilarious. Too late, nigga. All right. Too late. Anyway, the Rascals won the match. The idea of Fandango retiring, I don't really care. Yeah, I'm surprised he's still there. Everybody in the system needs to retire. Again, TNA needs to really, really, really focus on getting new talent, especially on the male side. I know it's hard because you're competing with all these other wrestling companies who have more money and they're spending more money. There's guys who would rather be jabronis in Ring of Honor than top guys in TNA. I get it. But they need to do something because their roster is still a problem. The fifth match on the show, the Great Hands and Mustafa Ali defeat the Hardy Boys and Cedric Alexander. Obviously, the Mustafa Ali Cedric Alexander feud is still going, but they're also trying to tell this story about the Great Hands being the number one contenders for the Hardys. I don't care about the Good Hands. I don't care about them at all. But there are teasing Mustafa Ali doing something with the Hardys. Mustafa Ali is kind of like the top heel on TNA because he kind of gets involved with multiple storylines. He also attacked Elijah, who of course was in WWE, who was Elias, during his live concert. He hit him in the head with a guitar. So they're doing a bunch of stuff with Mustafa Ali. He's everywhere. And clearly he was one of the smart guys who realized that AEW wasn't going to take him. So TNA is a great place for him to do whatever he wants in terms of character work and consistently working. He can still work indies if he needs more money. So he's a very smart guy. Cedric Alexander is too. Staying in TNA is actually quite smart. Instead of going to be a jabroni in Ring of Honor or just, being a guy that the company doesn't care about. But as long as Tony Khan's willing to absorb all of these people, they're willing to do it. But the match itself was what it was. I'm a big fan of the Hardys, obviously, and Cedric Alexander and Mustafa Ali. I just don't really care about the Great Hands. The fourth match on the show was a Knockouts Tag Team Championship match, triple threat. The Inspiration defeat the Angel Warriors, who are Xia Li and Lei Ying Li, and Mila Moore and Victoria Crawford. Now, it was supposed to be Victoria Crawford, who of course is Alicia Fox, and it was supposed to be her and Tessa Blanchard. But Tessa Blanchard said she was not medically cleared and she was replaced with this Mila Moore. So Mila Moore is one of the new knockouts that they have signed. They did a video package for her on the live episode where she talked about not growing up being a wrestling fan, but getting into it during college. And she was trained by Ace Steel, and, the All Women's pay-per-view is what got her into wrestling, but she didn't say which one. So we don't know which All Women's pay-per-view was the one that got her into wrestling. She didn't show much here because, again, it was 6 women running around in circles. But the Inspiration won. So there's that. It was fine. I think Tessa Blanchard not being able to wrestle sucks. But I think she's wrestling in Mexico, so maybe she tweaked something. Maybe she's lying. But her tan was excellent here. I'll say that. Excellent tan, Tessa. You did a good job hanging out in those Mexican beaches. Danny Luna was defeated by Indy Hartwell. in a no disqualification match. They wrestled on the live episode of Impact as well. That match got thrown out when Indy Hartwell hit Danny Luna with a steel chair because Danny Luna got frustrated during that match and was going to hit Indy Hartwell with a steel chair. Danny Luna is very good. I'm a big booster of Danny Luna because she actually reminds me a lot of Jordynne Grace, but she's just good. Indy Hartwell sucks. She blows. So obviously, because Indy Hartwell sucks, she wins the match because TNA is run by dullards. So there's that. The no disqualification match was fairly solid. Indy Hartwell hit her finishing move on an open chair in order to get Danny Luna to stay down. It was tame. You know, there was trash can lids and chairs. There was a trash can lids, chairs, stop signs. You know, there was a ladder in this thing. They threw powder in each other's eyes. It was okay. It was nothing too crazy, nothing too over the top that was going to make people, you know, lose their smile or anything like that. But it also was brutal enough to look like a street fight. All right, the second match on the show was BDE versus AJ Francis, and AJ Francis won this match. I have no fucking idea who BDE is. He's a YouTuber, but I've never heard of him. And AJ, he's very athletic. I watched the match, and he was jumping all over the place, and they did a really good job of telling the story of BDE's athleticism and his ability, his agility, and his ability to avoid AJ Francis. But AJ Francis, obviously, when he would catch him, he would hit big moves, and he ended up winning like 2 or 3 choke slams in a row in order to win the match. So it was not terrible, but I don't know. Maybe do something with this BDE guy instead of just bring him in as our skinny black version of Logan Paul, which is exactly what they're doing here. He's our Logan Paul, but we don't have no idea who this fucking guy is. Who is this guy? All right. So the first match on the pay-per-view, Kalani Jordan defeated M by Elegance. So they're doing a storyline where the By Elegance brand feels like they're entitled to a title match against Kalani Jordan because Ash by Elegance was the champion. And if she's the champion, then we're all champions. Kind of like the Freebird rule. Or as Iceman calls it, the By Elegance rule. Now, the Heather by Elegance versus Kalani Jordan match, which happened on the live episode of Impact, was better than the M by Elegance match, which took place at the pay-per-view. They seem to put a lot more effort into cheating in the Heather by Elegance match, and a lot of that had to do with Heather being very small. Like, she's very tiny. I think she's like 5'3" or something like that. She's really tiny. But they cheated more, even though this is a heel program, because Kalani Jordan is still a heel. We'll talk about that in a second. But the By Elegance brand was trying to steal the title from her, and Heather lost, and M lost too. Both lost to the split leg moonsault, which they call the one of a kind. So that's very good. Kalani Jordan's story, however, is actually a little bit more interesting in TNA. Mara Sade, Zaya Brookside, and Lei Ying Lee all invited her to the TNA locker room, saying, "Hey, look, we saw what you did over at NXT. We appreciate that, you wanted to represent us and our title. You're always welcome in our locker room." And Kalani Jordan is a bitch. She says, "Look, none of you know what I'm going through. Pressure is a privilege. None of you have ever been champions. I'm not interested in being your friend." And so she dogs these girls out for no reason. And they call her a cunt. This was great. So they got this thing where Kalani Jordan she's not feuding with heels anymore. And they got a couple of baby faces lined up. And Mara Sade clearly is the one that is going to be her rival here. She's going to be wrestling Lei Ying Lee, who is Xia Li in NXT. She's going to be wrestling her in a triple threat match of some description some point soon. I think it's at the Gold Rush show with Jordynne Grace. But after her is probably going to be Zaya Brookside, and then eventually they're going to get up to Mara Sade, who is going to be pretty good. That ought to be very interesting because Mara Sade has improved leaps and bounds since she was in NXT. But Kalani Jordan coming into her own as a heel has been extremely fun to watch. All right, so that was the show. It was extremely mid. It was actually below mid, but they sold out full sale, a full 626 tickets. At least they sold it out. 626 tickets. That's all they sold. Clearly, Chris Jericho put a lot of hype on this show. People took that the wrong way. Like, people think that Jericho was saying that TNA is the number 2 promotion. He said it looked like the number 2 promotion because they had a packed building and the crowd was there with a lot of energy. And that's what TNA's got. They've got a small but dedicated fan base, and that's really all they need. You just need a better roster and to put on better shows. This show was not it. It was a bunch of tag team matches and, 6-man tags and stuff. But this was one of the shows just to get them back in the groove. Now they got to build on the momentum that they got now. All right. Thank you guys for your time. I'll talk to you folks later. Be blessed.